All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh, double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And what I have here are a few headlines that I want to go through. And as you can see in the title of this lesson, um, fearful headlines, worst case scenario is now unfolding. Now that exact wording I got from one of the articles here that I'm gonna show or display. But basically, this ranges from what you've had recently, a spike of events recently where you've had one actual case of what actually could be classified as a some form of a T, right? T attack, and another which has been a an influx or an increase of um, threats. Okay, a lot of them being what they call bomb threats. Some being on planes, right, on flights, as you can see, the one in front of you over here, which this actually just came out, right? It says here, evacuation and ground stop at Kansas City International Airport were reportedly triggered by a bomb threat, with police and bomb sniffing dogs searching the concourse and terminals. So this isn't the first, right? You've had many, or a few, I should say, other cases like this. And what they're doing here is also priming the minds of people to start to get ready to expect this kind of behavior, right? This kind of scene, setting, and scenario, because at this point, it's really only a matter of time before they go ahead and set up something like this. All right, because when they set up something like this, it's a good problem, which based on the reaction of the people allows them to bring forth whatever solution it is they're seeking, which in this case is more more Americans to be in line with going against whoever it is they blame for these upcoming scenarios that we will see play out, okay, on the soils of America. And that's why when Trump was asked, really, should Americans fear, some event like this happening on, US soil, what was his response? I guess, right? And then he mentioned that he did already say people are going to lose their lives. So that's letting you know already what the atmosphere is. Okay. So in light of this, you also have um, this here. This happened, I believe, yesterday. Okay, but the article was published today, and it says here two radicals arrested after targeting anti-Islam NYC protests with shrapnel-packed devices, which apparently these were explosives. That were like custom made, and you can see this isn't coincidence, right? What you're seeing happening here, this isn't by coincidence, and it definitely is not going to stop here. So as you have these geopolitical tensions going on, right? You have this war with Iran that's brewing, and it's getting more and more intense. You also have at the same time um, the effects that's happening, because I have a couple of other headlines on here to address that is dealing with how that's affecting the global economy. All right, these elites behind the scenes know that if you want to bring down, because when you go and read about the actual philosophy of Albert Pike and their these secret societies or these elites, in order to have that pyramid, that global pyramid structure of rule, they need to collapse world economies. So what they first did was intertwine the world economies through the monetary system. So now you have interdependence between the different economies, and it's not just trading goods here and there, but it's in what currency you trade it in, and sort of building up this system here that creates that dependence, right? So you don't want to be isolated from the global economy, or else your country is not going to do well, right? You're going to tank. And once that dependence was created, they can now be able to affect all global economies, with just the destruction or the disturbance of this interdependent system that everybody has become accustomed to using. Okay, so they understand that the glue for it all is the economy, which is highly backed by monetary means. And so, in order to do that, that's why they're triggering this whole war that's going on, because they know that it's through this monetary system, it's through the disruption of the financial markets, the collapse of the stock market, the rising prices of oil and certain resources that creates this collapse that they're looking for. And going back to that pyramid structure of rule that they want, they can't have independent governments ruling and doing what they want to do. You can only get so far by infiltrating cabinets of different governments, whether it's in China or in Russia or in the Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or in the Western countries. You can only, control so much with agents. But but these countries, they still rule, independently. And what they want is to have a complete collapse of everybody, level the playing field. Okay, no constitution, no democratic rule, no none of that. Okay, and then from there they can centralize it all, where if everybody's on one playing field, you all report onto one central government. This first requires the collapse, and that's what we're seeing being orchestrated here. Now we know this is going to happen because it's written in scriptures, right? But if you notice, a lot of the prophecies show you what happens, right? The aftermath, because the collapse in itself is bringing judgment because of the effect it will have on the people, but it's to fulfill prophecy. Okay, and now we're seeing clearer and clearer how the events that lead up to these visions that we're seeing by the prophets take place. And that's why in Second Ezra 9 it mentions measuring the times diligently. All right, you compare what's written in the scriptures, you look at what's going on in the world, and you measure the times, and you start to see how one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. So anyway, let's get into this article here. um it says here, an NYPD spokeswoman said two counter protesters identified as 18-year-old Amir Balit and 19-year-old Ibrahim Nick threw improvised devices at demonstrators participating in a Stop the Islamic Takeover of NYC, or New York City, protest, which Yahushua did also warn about divisions. Okay, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And you're seeing this country divided on many levels. Both suspects were arrested shortly after the incident. All right, so let's take a look at this video here. But it says NYPD IDs both suspects after attempted bomb attack outside Gracie Mansion. See that? So, and this was here. This is in Manhattan. All right, and then today you also had this one, which I showed earlier, about the evacuation of a bomb threat, or the evacuation of this airport due to a bomb threat. And so eventually it's threats until it's not threats anymore, and it's actually something that is going down, in one place or in multiple places. Okay, in whatever form it takes. So it says here, device is jaw wrapped in black tape with nuts, bolts, and screws and fuse inside. Video shows second suspect pass bomb along to another. Second suspect being arrested by the NYPD. Let's take.
Stop moving! Guys, clear the pin! Clear the pool! Guys, clear the pin! Let's go! Move back! Let's go!
Right now. Right now.
Fuck up, guys.
So, it's no surprise that this is all taking place, right? They did they did release a warning. I believe it was the Department of Homeland Security that said basically to be on guard as an expect lone wolf attacks, right, and possibly cyber attacks and so on. So we're looking at possibilities of the poly crisis that is mentioned, by WEF and these so-called world leaders, where you have not just one thing, right? Like when you had 9/11, that was the main focus, right? Like one main thing here, but now you're having things that are taking place where even though you may know that this isn't authentic and this is like a false event, the effects of it are still very much real. See, the thing with like false events are the story behind it, the cover story, it's not real, it's orchestrated, but the actual events are real. And the effects you feel are real and they're used to bring about real change. All right. So they could very well, hit you with things on multiple levels, leading to financial disruption, electrical disruption, whether it's the grid or the internet going down or some data center being hit, whatever the case may be. All right, leading to bank runs, because that's what happens. A lot of the avalanche of chaos is formed through fear, right? When people start panicking and they start being afraid, and then they're running quick here, and then they're finding out that, hey, you're not able to take out this amount of money from your bank. Now the bank is like, we're closed for the day. And eventually, quickly, people will realize that the money you were going to get from there is not really going to matter anyway. Okay, so it says here, Jake Lang, Muslims in NYC tried to assassinate me with a effing nail bomb. Zoom in and look at all the nails, screws, and bolts. We need total remigration now. And that's what these events do. That's the whole concept of problem, reaction, solution. If you just come with a solution and there's no problem, people are fine. They don't need that. But now when you start a problem, people are looking for a solution. If you just so happen to bring one, there you go. And that's why a majority of the problems are fear-based. The problems they bring, for the most part, are fear-based, because fear is a very controlling factor, just as hunger also is. So it says here, then at approximately 12:38 p.m., a counter-protester identified as 18-year-old Amir Balat lit and threw an ignited device toward the protest area. It landed in the crosswalk in East 87th Street and East End Avenue. Witnesses reported seeing flames and smokes as it traveled through the air. And then it goes on and on. But this is the main point of what's going on here. Let's take a look.
At approximately 12:38 p.m., a counter-protester, identified as Amir Balat, an 18-year-old man, lit and threw an ignited device toward the protest area, landing in the crosswalk of East 87th Street and East End Avenue. Witnesses reported seeing flames and smoke as it traveled through the air before it struck a barrier and extinguished itself a few feet from police officers. Mr. Balat then ran southbound on East End Avenue toward 86th Street and gets a second device from a man tentatively ID'd as Ibrahim Nick, 19 years old. Mr. Balat lights the device and starts running with it. He then drops the device on the west side of East End Avenue between East 86th and East 87th Streets. Officers immediately secured the area and they took both men into custody. This was all captured on NYPD Argus camera. The bomb squad responded and examined the devices. Based on preliminary examination and X-ray imaging, the devices, which were a bit smaller than a football, appear to be a jar wrapped in black tape, importantly, with nuts, bolts, and screws, along with a hobby fuse that could be lit. At this time, we do not yet know whether the devices were...
So you can see that going on over there now. Something that reminded me of is, I'm going to pull it up on here real quick. But this trailer, right, from the movie Gray State, or at least the concept trailer of it. And hey, shalom, shalom, Yahweh Shem, Yahweh Shai, Brakatham. And in this trailer, what I found interesting, this particular scene that I'm playing here, is what's being reported on the news, right, as this is going down. You see, he says here, shutdown. Both sides traded bitter words as talks toward a uneven deal fell apart. And this sounds like a government shutdown, right? Which I believe you have, if I remember correctly, there's still a partial, either shutdown or looming shutdown or something of that nature going on. But when the main point I wanted to get here is, you can see there's riots right in the streets, flights, being people here, as it says, you see all that red over there, that's flights either being canceled or delayed. And what does that say? Travel suspended. Just go there real quick. Right. See that? Travel suspended. Flights grounded as NBC attack feared imminent. And we just saw here, you had just today, right? It says evacuation and ground stop at Kansas City International Airport were reportedly triggered by bomb threat. And this isn't the first one. Okay, that's the point. This isn't the first one. So they're priming the minds of the people, getting you ready to not be surprised if and when something like this goes down. But as we go on in here, you can see here, there's all this, and right here, most people might not catch it, but if you look at her reaction and what's going on, she's trying to reach him on the phone, but it seems something has happened to where the signal is going out. Okay, because look at her reaction. She can't reach him. He can't hear, and look at the guy behind him, and then the guy behind him too. Their phones are clearly not working, right? Look at him. He's checking, and it's not working. So they show you that snippet in there of something happening where, the signal was cut off. And now he says here, martial law declared, right? But look at this sub-headline over here. It says here, RFID CHIP manufacturers working overtime to fill orders. Okay, and then it shows, the NASDAQ is down and so on and so forth. So there's some very interesting things they show in this trailer, and we often make reference to it. But the simultaneous part here of the martial law being declared, as they're saying these manufacturers are working overtime. So clearly, according to the concept in the trailer, this why are they working overtime? Because the demand is high. Now, how exactly they decide to go about implementing it in there, well, that's up to how that movie plays out. But just wanted to show like a visual example there of how one event leads to another and how it's all intertwined, because all it takes is one, two, or a couple major events, and they can very easily, they have the cover of the war going on already. Okay, so they're already hitting you from a financial and economic standpoint, but now from an actual civilian civil unrest standpoint, all it takes is just one or two false events, and they're shutting it down. Okay, they're gonna completely shut it down. Okay, so dealing on that note on the home front, I brought a couple articles there, but now I want to switch and pivot a bit to what's going on here with Iran and and how the war is progressing. So you have Russia, which came out just very recently, and they said, because they were asked, are you let me pull it up on here. They were asked if they're going to be neutral. Okay, and they said, no, we're not going to be neutral. In fact, I'm going to just read this and play the clip of it. But when you listen to what the individual is saying, he's saying, look, this is common sense, right? Like the way he's speaking is basically saying this is common sense. You guys are breaking your back, going in reverse to believe nonsensical rhetoric. But the common sense is very open out there, and is pretty shocking. So it says, Kremlin, we are not neutral. We support Iran. Why do they support Iran? Because they have to support Iran. Why do they have to support Iran? Because one, it's biblical prophecy, and two, the way the Lord set it up is to where it's in Russia's best interest to support Iran, okay, and to make sure Iran doesn't fall. And now the U.S. is discussing a special operation to go, and they're telling you plainly to go in there and seize Iran's uranium, okay, and oil. And the claim is to get it out of the hands of terrorists. You went and dropped bombs on a nation that was willing to surrender all of that just to have peace. Mind you, they hadn't struck you. You were provoking them, and they still said, you know what, fine, we can have peace. You know, we'll agree to this negotiation because we're not interested in having a war. They said, no, F that. you gonna give us a war. And now, boom, here we are. Anyway, let me jump down here. It says here, Russia says it stands with its ally, Iran, at a moment Washington officials are outraged at reports that Moscow is supporting Tehran with targeting intelligence related to U.S. bases and Pentagon assets in the region amid Operation Epic Fury. And you see how hypocritical they are? What were they doing and still do today in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war? And yet they're enraged at the fact that Moscow or Russia is doing this in terms of supporting Iran. You see the hypocrisy in here? I mean, it just they're the perfect villain, and that's why the Lord is going to bring judgment upon them. So now I'm going to jump down. I just want to hit the main point here. So you see here, right? This part says the Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom. We are not neutral. We support Iran. We take the current situation very badly, and we do not understand the Western logic that consists of holding Iran responsible for everything. So let's listen to what he says.
Most of the Gulf Cooperation Council countries have come out in support of Israel and American action. Is Russia going to be neutral in this?
We are not neutral. No, we are neutral. We are supportive to Iran, of course, and we consider, as I have said, very negatively what is being done. And besides, we do not understand this logic. It is the logic at the moment of Western countries and of the others is that Iran is to blame for everything. But no one is saying that US and Israel has initiated an attack against Iran, and Iran is only responding to this attack. So this is simply unfair.
You hear that? And anybody looking at this from just a common sense perspective can see that, right? That's exactly what they did, right? You go and attack them, and they respond to your attacks, and now, you know, that's it. They're the demons, you know, they're the boogeyman. They're trying to survive. They're trying to survive. But according to Western logic, like he's saying here, when you're hit by the West, you cannot defend yourself, because then that's T, you know, that's dangerous. And we cannot have that. You have to allow yourself to be attacked, get your resources taken, and basically subject yourself. But if this was, you know, a couple decades ago, sure, they might have done that. But right now, in the time of prophecy, this is the time when Babylon goes down. Okay, this is the time when now the downfall of this place is imminent. So what we're seeing is the worst case scenario unfolding step by step by step. It's all being unraveled. Okay. And when you go, you know, I'm going to read it at you real quick. Pull it up. 1 second here. This is all accurate, you know, and what's going to happen is very, very soon. See, right now, you know, it's the important guys right now, right, to the world are those that can break down what's going on here from, you know, a carnal perspective, right? They can look at it. They can say, well, you know, due to my experience in working in the U.S. military, or my experience in speaking to this person and that person, due to that, you know, I can tell you this, so I foresee this happening, or my knowledge of history is, you know, open up my perspective to be able to give you a accurate insight. But as I've been saying, it only goes so far, right? What happens when the chaos is so bad now that the world has to admit that this isn't the workings of just men. Now they're seeing that this is directed by a divine power. This is there's divine intervention going on here. And at that point, everything that they that they thought they knew or understood goes out the window. And now you're going to start to seek, well, what is going on, right? Those that were eventually telling you in Second Ezra, I believe 15 or 16, it says that there shall be no man to comfort them, right? A part of that comfort is getting information in these so-called uncertain times. Now, when the people that give you this information, that tell you, oh, it looks like this is going to happen and that is going to happen, start themselves looking for information and start themselves asking, well, what is going to happen? We don't know. See, in Isaiah 19, it talks about that, right? It has the when it likens, Babylon to Egypt, and is describing the wise men, right, of North and these princes, they become brutish. So there are answers that they can give you as to this is going to do this and it's going to lead to that. That all goes out the window once that prophecy is kicked into full gear. And once this thing goes nuclear, at that point, it's out of everybody's hand. So it's an escalation that is going to go into a supernatural domain. And that's the part where a lot of people do not foresee. And that's why it mentions in Wisdom of Solomon, the 5th chapter, that this was far beyond all that they looked for. Their analysis stops at, okay, Iran wins, and then what happens? And then they go into more of like a carnal rearrangement of world superpowers. Okay, the US loses the war, but then what? Then Russia comes in and they take over, but it's not going to go that way, because the ending of this war, the latter part of this war, is going to take everybody by surprise. Remember, 2 Ezra 13 says this is going to be one realm against another. So at that point, the whole world is going to be taken by surprise as to how this war actually plays out and how it actually ends. Okay, you can see everybody's talking about the financial crisis. Everybody's talking about the economic downfall. Everybody's talking about that. But when you now have the return of Yahushua, when this war gets out of hand and now it's gone nuclear and the Babylon is being destroyed, okay, and all this is happening, they're going to have this scrambled mind of what the hell is going on. And it just doesn't stop. And at that point, you're going to understand that the stability comes from the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua. And he has placed that with his elect. Okay, he has placed that with his prophets. That's when they're going to know and realize, no, we can't see carnal answers for this. Okay, we need those prophets. Those men, they were speaking the truth. And we're at that point. So, it's all sweet over here. But yeah, I wanted to pull this up here. And this is why understanding prophecy is crucial. You can't emphasize that enough. You have to understand biblical prophecy. You have to understand biblical prophecy. You have to understand it because we're living in it. Okay, we're actually living in it. It's not about, oh, I know the breakdown to this, but you, like I've said before, so you can hear somebody break down, a chapter, and then, you're told, okay, it means this, but do you understand what that actually means? Do you, when you look on a map, can you tell where Gog is right now? Can you tell where Israel or Iran is? Do you know what that actually looks like? Do you know when the scriptures say this and they're going to do that? Do you understand that? And if you don't, then it's a surface level, shallow understanding of it. But you need to, because the deeper you understand something, the stronger your belief in it is. So you need to take a seat and understand prophecy, or else you're gonna be, like you're just there and you hear and you get excited when brothers get excited because they're excited. So if they're excited, that means that something big is happening. But you yourself don't really understand what is happening. That's not good. Okay, that's not good, because you're not always going to have brothers next to you to feed off of what they're doing. Or if they're upset, then, oh, damn, something didn't go right. Prophecy related. Oh, they mentioned this country here. Oh, all I know is Russia, Iran, Israel, and that's it. World War III. You have to actually study and understand. And the lessons are there. The lessons are there, brothers. I mean, at this point, it's just like repeating the same old thing. The amount of lessons that we've done from our elders and elder brothers all the way down to us, it's there. But you have to take the time and go and study and understand these prophecies, because the time is upon us and it's unfolding. And you don't have much longer, because it doesn't take much. Okay, it doesn't take much for all this to be shut off just like that. The famine of the world is a side effect of the chaos that's unraveling. It's a side effect of all the things that are going to be taking place. But that in itself is a fulfillment of prophecy. Anyway, this is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38. I'm going to start at 2. I'm going to jump around just because I want to hit the point on here, tying back to why we're seeing this response here from the Kremlin or Russia. And it's expected. Okay, this is Ezekiel 38. I'm going to start at verse 2. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog. Okay, so Gog is referring to Russia. Now, you may say, well, Magog and Meshach, Tubal, these are Japhetic names. Yes, they are. But in prophecy, it's referring here to Russia, because that is the when you look up in an old map, you'll see a lot of these names. Remember, after the flood, when the ark landed on Mount Ararat, right, and you had the descendants of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, they eventually spread out. Okay, and then they started to go into different regions of the earth, and you have the land of Canaan, because Canaanites went and dwelt there, and they called the land after their names. So these regions, okay, of Javan and Meshach and Tubal and all these different areas were places that were originally inhabited by these, Japhetic people and, Canaanites and, descendants of Shem and so on and so forth. But today, it's not the case. Right. Today, a lot of those Japhetic nations have been pushed out of those regions, and you now have different nations of people dwelling in those regions. OK, so when you deal with prophecy, for example, here, just as you would see Babylon in the scriptures, but it's not talking about ancient Babylon, it's talking about America. OK, America today. So likewise, when you see here Gog, this is referring to Russia. And it says here, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Now, jumping down, because as you read in here, you'll get the context of what the prophecy is concerning him, right? And in a nutshell, what the Lord is saying here is Russia, which for a period of time, even now, they're still like slow, they're being turned, right? They're being turned, as verse 4 says. And what that means is the Lord is using the events that are taking place on the earth to turn and stir up that spirit in them, in their minds, okay? To say, look, the time of peace is over. You need to understand that we're in a time of war. You need to be ready, okay? You need to be ready. The scripture is going to say it, prepare thyself. So you need to be ready to jump into this war, because you will be drawn into it. That's why you were set up. And that is to fulfill biblical prophecy. So in verse 4, it goes into that, turn thee back, as in like if you're fishing, right, and you have a fish that grabs onto that hook, that bait, and it tries to swim away with it, eventually you got to reel it back in. And that's what the Lord is doing. He's reeling these nations into this war. So jumping down to verse 5, it says here, and then it goes into like their armor, right, their military might, their so on and so forth, their armies. Persia, which Persia is dealing with Iran, right? So Persia is Iran today. Now, they're not the only Persian nations out there, because they all go back to the Elamites, but the focus primarily or predominantly here in prophecy is Iran. That's why you see them all over the news. Go on Google and type in Iran. You'll see it all over the news, right? And it's not just going to be Iran, but right now the focus is Iran. Okay, so Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, which goes into their armies, the house of Togarma of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee, many people with Russia. Verse 7, be thou prepared. You see that? So even though right now it looks like they're sitting on the sidelines, they're prepared. Okay, they're prepared that at any moment when they need to jump in, they will jump in. And Iran has said, look, we're not trying to negotiate peace. You want to bring your troops? Go ahead. We're ready. We're waiting. So you go ahead and you bring in your special forces, and they will, right? They're gonna go ahead and do that. It's prophecy. It says here, so be thou, referring to Russia, prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Let's go into that word guard. So Russia is prepared, and they're prepared to go as far as it takes to guard their interests. And guess what? Iran is a part of Russia's interests. Okay, the word here is mashamar, which the word shamar is to guard or to like protect. Okay, so it says here, place of confinement, prison, jail, watch, observance, the act of guarding. Okay, and let's go into the root word shamar, where it says to keep watch, ward, to protect, save life. Okay, what else do we have on here? To protect, to preserve, to reserve, to be on one's guard, to take heed, to beware. But, you know, as you can see here, that's the role Russia is going to play, to be like a watchman or a guard, or to protect those nations that were listed in there. And as we saw in there, Iran is included in that. Let me share screen here again. Slack you about that. Okay, so going back here, so that is why you're seeing the sentiment here, and it's very obvious, as it should be, that Russia is supporting Iran, and they're telling you, like, look, bro, you're out of your mind if you think that we are going to be on the side of the West. And that's why in Revelation 13 it mentions the feet of the beast being the bear, which represents Russia. Not that Russia is a part of the beast, because they will not, but they're going to end. They're going to be a part of the ending of this beast. So they're going to play a key role in terms of military might in destroying this beast. And this is all happening in line with biblical prophecy. Okay, now let's go. I have one more or two more on here. And this here is dealing with the escalation, right? I believe it was yesterday. You had either yesterday or the day before, you had Trump talking about how Iran was going to get hit very hard. And it seems that what he was referring to was that the fact that they hit their was it their oil? I'm not sure if it's the refineries or it's the oil plants, but you could see that it's a big thing, right? It's a huge explosion. In fact, it's actually in here. It was a huge explosion. Okay, and you can see just like that. And in this article, what came to mind that I wanted to damn, look at that. Lord have mercy. That I wanted to show was this scene. There's a particular scene in here. Let's see, it might be over here. And hopefully I didn't close it out. But there's a particular scene in here where it's not this one. This is a pretty good one too. There you go. This one right here. And notice the headline, right? It says, this is Tehran. This is Tehran at sunrise. Okay. Tehran at sunrise today, but the sun is hidden behind a sky filled with smoke after a night of intensive strikes on oil facilities. Thick black clouds now hang over the city, turning morning into something that feels like night. This was also described. And that's why when you go to certain precepts, which I'm not going to go to, I'm going to quote it, but we know there's precepts in Revelation that go into that. There's precepts in Isaiah 13 that go into that about the sun and the moon being darkened, okay, and not giving their light. This is supposed to be sunrise. This is supposed to be daytime. Look at it. It's dark. Look at that. Like it's nighttime because it's covered. So the day of the Lord being darkness is also literal, because the skies are going to be, there's going to be a whole lot of activity going on in the skies, from missiles flying overhead, explosions, and that smoke, the mushroom cloud and that smoke causing that thick layer of darkness. It's going to be a very, very eventful, to say the least, an eventful day. Oh, what a wonderful day. Inside joke. But as that starts to happen, you're going to have fear. Fear is going to be the most common commodity out here as we enter into the next phases of prophecy. And that fear was not going to be like you watch a scary movie and then you get scared and then you call it a day. No, the fear is going to be very authentic, because you're going to have a reason to fear. And it's going to be of your destruction. So this is the last article I have here. It says, it begins Iranian drone strikes Bahrain, desalination plant as worst case scenario unfolds. Now, the desalination it's very important. Okay, it's very important for these nations here because it really comes down to a matter of survival. All right, I'm going to pull up here. This is what the process of desalination is. It says here, it is the artificial process by which salt water, generally seawater, is converted to fresh water. Now, if you don't know, why can't they just use it? Just if they imagine a country, right, that's surrounded by just water, and you're like, why is water an issue? Why can't you literally just fetch water from the ocean? You cannot drink ocean water. What that means is you can drink it, like nobody's going to physically stop you. At least they should, but you can drink it, but you're going to die. If you're stranded at sea and you think that, and you go and drink seawater just like that, you're going to die because of the high concentration of salt in it. Your body has to try to dilute or filter out that salt from the water. And what ends up happening is, let me type this in here. How do you die of seawater? You end up getting dehydrated, contrary to popular belief, right? You're wondering, wait, how is drinking water going to dehydrate you? When salt enters your cells, it pushes out water. So that's why when you eat salty things, you get very thirsty because your body's telling you, hey, I need more water. It says here, death from drinking seawater occurs primarily due to severe dehydration and salt poisoning. The human body cannot process the high salt concentration in seawater, leading to a cascade of physiological malfunctions. And there's, let me see. Many different, when you break it down, the actual process of it, you can read that if you want. Long story short, it's not ideal and it's not a good practice. So that's why they have the process of desalination, right? It is the artificial process by which salt water, generally seawater, is converted to fresh water. More generally, desalination is the removal of salts and minerals from a substance. It is possible to desalinate salt water, especially seawater, to produce water for human consumption or irrigation, producing brine as a byproduct. So just like you have crude oil and you need the refineries to, refine that into usable oil for the different things we use it for. So now if they're striking these facilities or these plants, that's spelling major trouble. These plants were not built overnight. Okay. And it takes a while. And especially if this isn't like a one-off thing. It's not like there was some, because they have multiple, it's not just one, but it's not like you just hit one plant and then that's it. It was an accident, call it a day. No. If this is now the target, you're in trouble. You're in big, big trouble. Especially if you're in that region where you depend on shipment coming in with food through the Strait of Hormuz, which is then now under the control of of Iran. And they're like, look, they're saying it's not closed, but you just if you're not in their best interest, you try going through there and find out if it's closed or not. So this is spelling out, some big trouble because it's gonna take out, if it continues, these Gulf states. And once they're down, that's a very big problem. And you'll see that when you go to your gas station and going to the gas station and seeing the prices at the pump. That's only one. That's the visible part of it. That's not the only part. That's the visible part. But you'd be surprised. Why are my groceries going up? Why is my rent going up? Why is my energy bill going up? Because guess what? They all also depend in one way, shape, or form on that oil. When you go to the grocery store, the food doesn't respawn on the shelves. This isn't GTA 4. You need trucks that drive hundreds of miles. And where do they pick it up from? Factories. And where do the factories get it from? Farms and imports. So the ships, what do they use? Oil. What do the factories use to manufacture these products? Oil. It's all energy, and they depend on it. And then to send it, to actually transport it, when that truck driver is driving all those miles, guess what? His car is dependent upon, oil. So it's not just, I went to the gas station and the prices went up and, oh man, I'm cooked. Oh, it's fine. I'm gonna ride a bike. Yeah, you're gonna ride a bike to the store and find out there's no food over there. But you know, realistically speaking, more than likely, as things get really bad, nations have precautionary measures that they take to try and mitigate it. Though it's you know, depending on how things go, it might not be to any avail. But you know, they try to put price checks, price control, different kinds of things in there. But when the event is so bad that those mitigation strategies don't even feel like anything is happening, it's like being in so much pain that a painkiller doesn't do anything. You know you're in trouble then. Anyway, I'm going to read just a little bit of this. It says here, from data centers in the Gulf area to water desalination plants, the worst case scenario is now unfolding in the Middle East conflict, and no boundaries regarding civilian infrastructure. So you're seeing a crisis on many levels, right? This isn't just one thing to focus on. As you're trying to focus on this one thing, and a lot of people that live here, that yeah, whether it's in Europe or in the US or wherever you are, and your mind, you're just completely checked out and tuned out of this, thinking, look, I'm gonna just focus on my work. I'm gonna just go to the gym. I'm gonna just focus on school and call it a day. Once that starts to become harder to do, you'll start to look at why. Yo, why are gas prices going up? Hey, why is this happening? Why is that happening? And you'll be forced to look in the same direction that everybody else has been looking in. You're just going to be a lot later to the game. And you just better hope that you're not too late. So it says here, we warned earlier this week, and data centers being hit. That's also, you know, remember we played a trailer from Gray State, right? The phones weren't working. Guess what? A lot of the signal and the connection you use, those towers, those weird looking cell towers that flash that little red light and so on, they're sending signals that allows your service, whether it's internet or phone, to work. If they're hit or they're disrupted, you're cooked. And a lot of people, you know, they're heavily dependent on this artificial system. So it's going to be a very shocking wake-up call, like in the movie Leave the World Behind, except the movie doesn't end after an hour or an hour and 20 minutes. You wake up a week later and you're still in it. Says here, we warned earlier last week, after correctly predicting that data centers would be targeted, that water desalination plants would be next. Al Jazeera reports that after Iranian Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas, all right, not going to attempt to pronounce that, so we'll just call it a day, claimed that the U.S. targeted a water desalination plant in Iran. An IRGC kamikaze drone then targeted a desalination plant in Bahrain. So these, and you can see here, right, it says Bahrain says an Iranian strike damaged a desalination plant, marking a new phase of the conflict targeting water infrastructure. And it's kind of like beating these nations, or trying to beat them into submission, to understand and get it through their heads that, look, if you are an ally of our enemy, you are what did they say to Europe? You're a valid target. And Iran said that to the European Union. They said, if you join in here, you're a valid target. You're putting an X on your back. So just beware of that. Gulf countries rely heavily on desalination. Qatar, nearly 100%. Kuwait and Bahrain, approximately 90%. Oman, 86%, and Saudi Arabia, 70%. So that's a very painful hit right there. Like if you were fighting, they say you hitting them in vital spots right there. Yeah, you going for somebody's liver at that point, trying to end the fight. Okay, and then it goes on, so on and so forth. Let me see if there was something else in here that I wanted to mention. Yeah, so I mean, this is pretty much the gist of it. But as you can see here, that there are a lot of things happening, on the home front, you could say, and also geopolitically, and they're all intertwined one way, shape, or form. Okay, so just be alert, right? As the scriptures say, remain circumspect, because we know that we're in evil times. We know we're in evil days, and things can just like what, it's been about a week or so. So 2 weeks ago, this wasn't the case. 2 weeks ago, they were talking about negotiations. It was what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And then now in a matter of, or a little over 7 days, all this is what's going on. Okay, over this event that was triggered. So imagine multiple devastating events, once again, both on a global scale, on an economic scale, and also within different countries, okay, being hit, where this is no longer a threat, but now you have some, I mean, imagine that visual you saw, if you've seen it, if you go and look up the explosion, right, of Iran's oil facility. Imagine some not obviously not to that same degree or that same kind of attack, but imagine some major event like that happening on US soils. You think that wouldn't be convenient enough to declare martial law? Because Trump is seeing that his numbers are going down. He's not interested in having, and that's why he's saying that he's not going to sign any legislations until they pass that Save America Act, because he's worried about that midterm. So all they're waiting for is the right catalyst, the right opportunity, and they don't care whether you know it's fake or not. What matters is, how real are you feeling it? How is the effect? You know, when you seeing, you know, actual lives being lost in front of your face, you seeing the country being rocked, they don't care whether you know it's fake or not. The effect ain't fake. You know, but hey, all in all, as the scriptures say, Isaiah 33:6, the wisdom, knowledge, and stability is going to come from Yahweh Ba'asham Yahweh Shai. Okay, so maintain the faith in the Lord, you know, and continue to watch, right? Because we're pretty much at that time. So, you know, that's pretty much all. Okay, so Shabbat Yahweh 777, community find music 15, drives nature, and how that links with Saudi Arabia and the news. What I'll say is, we've done, you know, many lessons on it. Lord willing, what I'll do is I'll post a couple, you know, in here, in a couple links to lessons that have been done on it in the description on here. That's to answer your question, Shabbai Yahweh 777. And you know, so look out for that on here. If not, I'll do another lesson, you know, going into it. But I'm going to wrap up here for now, and then we'll go into that. So, Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.